I'm going to show you a clip from the film that is called, that is in the exhibition, that is called On Photography, Dispossession and Times of Struggle.
الجامعة كان فيها طبعا تحرك طلابي كثير بسبب حرب بغداد، وصار في مظاهرات وبقت الجامعة قوية كثير، وكانت واجت الإدارة سكرت كل الابواب. لأحكي لك بالتفصيل أنا يعني لا هي حتى في ست أنا كثير يعني مهمة كانت وقتها بالحركة الطلابية اسمها موقع. طلعت هي على الباب الحديد وفتحته للشباب، وحتى أصيبت بإجرة وأخذوها على المستشفى. طلعوا مني من العدا ومشوا مظاهرات. الإدارة أخذت قرار إنه كل الطلاب اللي شاركوا إما يفصلوا أو يجمدوا، يعني بصيروا، عرفت كيف؟ بيتجمد دراستهم أو يفصلوا. هلا حتى فكرة التجنيد كانت بتخوف انه ممكن يرجعوا يوقفوا لك دراستك بالنص. هلا جمال عبد الناصر اخذ قرار انه كل الطلاب اللي فصلوا من الجامعه الامريكيه بده ياخذهم فورا بالجامعه القاهره بدون، بجامعه مصر يعني، بس بالذات القاهره بدون اي امتحانات، يعني بالسنوات نفسها اللي دخلوا فيها. فهن ما فيها كانت صفهم تقريبا، فأجيت لهون دغري دخلت قسم اللغة العربية بجامعة القاهرة. يعني نبيها بعدين بعد ما عملت فترة درست كلية الآداب، طرح عليها إنه أنت ما دام بتحبي، كانت من زمان هي ناوية تروح على فرنسا تدرس فنون، هيدا هي وصغيرة، وبعدين ما يعني كانت الاجواء كلها مش كثير تسمح بهيك مثل هلا كل الاولاد مسافرين. فحتى الجامعه الامريكيه كانت بعتقد بتذكر في ثلاثه كانوا هي وصاحباتها اجوا، كان هيدا الشيء بالنسبه لصيدا كبير انه جامعه مختلطه هيكونوا فيها هي وناهده سيران ورفيقه بنت صاحبتهم، يعني صايره انا بنسى الاسماء معلش. هي وبالجامعه طبعا هي تعرفت على الدكتور علي مختار هون، وكان هو عم يدرس طب وصار في علاقه بيناتهم. بس قبل فكرت هي ليه ما قالوا لها ليه ما بتدخلي واحد من اصدقائها اللي كثير يعني ناقد هو ادبي، قال لها انت ليه ما بتروح تدخلي معهد السينما؟ فراحت دخلت معهد السينما. كانت أول بنت بتدخل معهد السينما في مصر، ما كانش في حدا تاني يعني. مصطفى لما عمل صوروا الاشياء اللي كانت في جنازه والسنايبر بتاعه واستاذه وهيدا، فقال نبيها انا حابعت لك الماده كلها لان بهمني تحفظ في اماكن امنه اذا بتتذكر، بس مش هي اللي بعثت. بمعنى ما كانت يعني ما كانت بهذيك الفتره، مش بتذكر هلا تاريخيا، مش بتذكر لان هي سنه ال 75 يعني كانت وقت حرج جدا. هيدا الصور كلها الجنازه والسنة هيدا اللي فيها كله هيدا كان مثل ما قلت لك بعت لها. كانش هي ما كانتش يعني ما عندهاش كان برنامج فيلم عن معروف سعد بلحظتها. لا، الفيلم قتلت معروف سعد هي اللي جابت هيدي المادة، مش يعني مش هي كانت ناوية تصور فصورتها، بس بعتت إلا على أساس إنه يعني تبركن عمل الفيلم. يعني مهم من الأساس هو إنسان جماهيري من النوع ده. هلا شو مفهوم يعني جماهيري فوضوي أو منظم، هذا شيء ثاني، بس عم نحكي إنه هو بالأساس علاقته بالناس كانت كتير قوي. معروف سعد لفوه بالعلم الفلسطيني لأنه هو كان من الناس اللي كانوا يدخلوا بعمليات إلى فلسطين، هو من بدايات المقاومة كان إلى فلسطين، فلذلك اعتبروه إنه هو من جماعة من الشهداء، فلفوه بالعلم الفلسطيني. ما له علاقة. قبل النائب هو نائب لما كبر، هو صغير كان يدخل، لما كان استاذ كان كل وقت يدخلوا على فلسطين، وانا بعرف لان خالي الله يرحمه ابو سعيد كان يشتغل معه فتره. عرفت كيف؟ يعني كانوا مجموعه يفوتوا ويطلعوا، لهم صور كثير ما بعرف اذا جبتها، لهم صور كثير بالدخول والعمليات وكذا.
Now, one of the reasons why I show this while talking about an after image is because I don't know if you recognize the three Mustafa Saad in the center, the son of Maruf Saad, who was subject to a car explosion in the early phase of the Israeli occupation of Lebanon. So he survived for a while and then he died, but he was blind. The second one was killed before, actually. Kamal Jumblat, 1976, and George Howie was killed in 2005 or 2006. And when I saw this first, I saw it in before 2005, and George Howie had not died. The moment George Howie died, was killed, I remembered this. So it's not that I remembered it, it came to me. It came to me. And it's this kind of ecosystem that includes photographic records, and us, and steps on our memory intervenes in our life. All of a sudden, I don't know who saw my film 28 Nights and a Poem. There's a record where Majda Rumi is singing أحلف بسماها وبترابها, this patriotic song, to Hosni Mubarak and his generals, his army generals. And when you see it when he is in power is something, but when you see it when he is no longer in power is another story. And this has nothing to do with it, but it has to do with the whole ecosystem that I'm talking about. Over the past, and why are we talking about this? Because the Arab Image Foundation misses a lot of collections that passed through it but left. But they left an after image, exactly like the aftertaste of something that you might have eaten. Over the past 20 years, the Arab Image Foundation parted with significant photographic collections. And again, why is this? Why would I use an absent collection to talk about the history of a foundation that is still in operation, and not talk about present collections? That's an open question. We can talk about it later, but this is an important parti pris, like an important approach that I take. Why do I choose broken up objects to talk about photography? Is my aim really photography, or is it history in general? I think broken up objects, emulsion that is cracking, images that are disappearing can talk about other things that a regular portrait that is untouched or that is in perfect shape cannot bring up. And similarly, I'm doing the analogy, certain absences in the collection of the Arab Image Foundation can tell us a lot about the times that we are at, about the practices of a conservation institute like the Arab Image Foundation in a place like Beirut. This is how history is written, in my opinion. And this, or at least this is the interesting angle that I'd like to take while writing that history. Over the past 20 years, the Arab Image Foundation parted with significant photographic collections. They did not get burned or destroyed, but were simply taken back by their owners before the Arab Image Foundation was in a position to work on them. There was undoubtedly a slightly bitter aftertaste to every withdrawal, in the same way as there is an after image to every photograph that is no longer there. Can you forget an image that you've seen and you've never seen again? If it impacts you, khalas, it's going to come back to you. It's in your system. You cannot forget it. The Arab Image Foundation was born divided between an ambition that is limited in scope, with a particular mode of generating collections through artists' desire and sampling of local photographic practices, and another ambition of becoming a repository of all photographic archives, institutional or photographers' archives. And these are two different ambitions that would have required two different teams, different modalities of access, different communication strategies, and different mission statements. They are two ambitions which simply described two different institutions. One of them looks like the Louvre, and one of them looks like a small organization that is interested in reflecting on history, on the photographic object, or whatever. And the foundation embodies both desires. Until today, the foundation embodies both desires. Nevertheless, the fact that collections spend time at the Arab Image Foundation, sharing the same space with other collections, even for a brief period, had an impact on organization. Kleidman's collection, for example, of Jerusalem photographers was one of the first collections to be returned to its owner. Rifat Shaderzi's collection was much larger in scale and was entrusted to the Arab Image Foundation at a high cost that it wasn't able to meet. The collection of Egyptian photographer Van Leo, which was on loan from the American University in Cairo, is another example of a large collection that the Arab Image Foundation invested resources in, but could not work on as much as it would have loved to do before the collection was returned. the ambition of the Arab Image Foundation, disproportionate to its actual experience, knowledge, skills, and resources over the past few years, compromised some of its negotiation power facing more powerful institutions. The unwilling return of collections triggered difficult questions, if not an urgent revision of its essential practices in collecting and preservation, in values, and even maybe mission. Do we still collect photographs, and how? Do we want to belong to the culture of continuous excessive accumulation, or do we want to keep looking for a model that allows us a selective collection through artistic practices? This is still essential, and the foundation, we are too many, and discussion never settles down. But this is maybe what keeps this foundation going as well. How to organize such a collection of diverse origins and diverse groups of items? Do we mix collections or not, and when? What is the status of objects made with photographs, such as albums, catalogs? What is the status of non-photographic material accompanying a collection? These are questions that touch the essence of what photography is today. If photography is description, how do we evoke or even describe it as a standalone object or as a transaction in a descriptive or an organizational practice? These are essential questions that would not have been raised otherwise. At distance from objects, I'm almost done. At distance from objects and the photographic practices that produced them, unlike the photographer who took these photographs, a researcher, historian, is not aggravated by mistakes. If you are a photographer and you come to me, say, hey, please take a picture of me, I take a picture, and next day I realize while developing the picture that is total collapse. I mean, I would be really embarrassed. This person came and trusted me, or sometimes it happened to photographers at ephemeral events. A photographer is sent to take a picture of a football game and then comes back and realizes that his films show it are failed. It's totally embarrassing. But for a historian, it's not at all. If the films reach historians' hands, they are not about failing or not failing. Then they are about something else. So a historian is not aggravated by mistakes, but instead finds in them a source of richness. They tell extraordinary stories, provide behind-the-scene knowledge, and shed light on a photographer's practice. They shed light actually on that ecosystem that I'm pointing at. The wrong exposure 50 years later is no longer what it used to be, a picture that failed because the subject moved or blinked, and you get this a lot when you are a kid in the 60s. Going to a photographer's studio, sometimes you go back to the photographer, he tells you, no, actually your son has blinked his eyes, so we need to take the picture again. It happened to me twice in my youth. A picture that failed because the subject moved or blinked and was put aside by its maker or by its subject 50 years later is no longer simply a failed picture. A negative that has developed stains because it hasn't been washed well or fixed well and was therefore put aside by the photographer and identified as not usable anymore, 100 years later would change in unpredictable ways and would provide researchers insight on its composition and material, among other things. It becomes an out-of-the-ordinary object that has something to say, whereas an intact image has nothing to say, apart from the description of the situation it's meant to describe. In fact, it would have that defective image or object would have more to say than a perfectly processed negative. At a conservation institute like the Arab Image Foundation, an object like this would become a tool for the producing of further knowledge about its composition and the practices it belongs to, and might be displayed for a reason that was considered a defect by its maker. Moreover, photographers' conventions that facilitated work and left traces, when practiced over and over and over, for a visual artist interested in the traces of work, become like illuminations. So retouching, masking, numbering, or cropping indications on a negative tell us today how each photographer produced and crafted their images. Furthermore, now we talked about photographic practices, now we are talking about preservation practices. Furthermore, at distance from objects and the preservation practices that classified them, organized them, while in the custody of a conservation institute, ensuring or denying access to them, the mishandling of photographic items, the accidents, the uninformed or insensitive organizational measures, the lack of vision or planning, even an ambition that exceeds the capacity of an organization or its staff, and that might have possibly left a visible impact on the collection, all may seem embarrassing for an organization, but seem less conflictual and less problematic when viewed as research material into the history of an organization and the development of discourse or its prevention within it. The annotated history of the Arab Image Foundation is not intended as a biographical exhibition, and it's not intended as a historical overview in a traditional sense, because it highlights pitfalls, accidents, absences, more than presences, more than looking back at achievements or past projects. And from that angle, it's not a biographical exhibition. On the contrary, it looks for conduits that history will take to emerge and make a record of them. Thank you. I'm amazed that you are still here. I was expecting withdrawals. But thank you. I was expecting withdrawals. So I was trying to imagine how to theorize about audience withdrawal this way.
Oh, sorry. It's a question a little bit out on the side, where I think it's in Fellini's Within Me, and they enter in a grotto and it's covered with
Roma.
frescoes.
Roma.
Voilà, Fellini Roma. And it's erasing in front of them.
Mm. No one can match this anymore about archaeology. He caught it. He did it.
I have 2 or 3 questions, like just to, what is the difference between habitat and ecosystem for you?
I mean, I like the term habitat, but I like I use it in replacement of context.
And why
Because habitat includes, habitat is more used for natural habitat, and it designates the whole ecosystem that ties trees to earth, to birds, to fungus, to everything. And I like to talk about the context of photographs as a habitat as well, because there is emotions that ties it to its context. There is financing, there's politics, there is business, there is economy. And all of this would not be as clear when you say it's a context for images. So I'm not interested in the occurrence of an image in a context. So it's not really like the image that made the news on a newspaper's first page. The first page would be its context, maybe, but its habitat is something else. Is where is the origin? Where is the negative kept? How does it live? Is it well preserved or not? How is the photographer paid by the newspaper? All of this constitute a habitat of a picture.
You begin to use habitat and you finished up using more ecosystem words.
No, I mean, whenever I talk, I mean, when I use here in print, I did not, like in my text, I don't have an ecosystem, but every time I use habitat, I'm trying to explain that
Okay.
I'm referring to that ecosystem.
Okay, and is there in your use of terms a difference between an object and a material? Because you don't say material, you say object always.
Yes, an object is a mixture of matter, the material, يعني, with whatever is on it. If there's an image printed on it, it's part of the object. The material designates whether this is wood. It doesn't say if it's if there's something on it or not.
Okay.
If there's a name on it or not.
Okay, and I have a question about undividing history.
Yes.
When you use this وقت اللي بتحطهم على بعضهم شو بتختار تحط فوق الثاني؟
It's both actually. يعني maybe you did not see it, but there are two images that are equal.
بس شو بتشوف بالأول؟ يعني في دايما
يعني there is they are pairs of images, pairs of pictures. One made by Bendov. Through it, you see a ghost from Khalil Raad's negative, and one is Khalil Raad's image, where you see a ghost from. So
you do twice each time.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
This was okay.
I have one question. I'm sure there are many stories, but could you kind of elaborate reasons for withdrawal and when collections are withdrawn? And linked to that, I've always wondered how the foundation defines its relationship towards collections and images. Are you trustees? Are you kind of you obviously don't own the images, but how do you negotiate this? And then even if collection is withdrawn, how do you negotiate whether you can keep kind of one copy in the many series of and negotiating the terms and conditions on which copies can be produced and how they can be used?
Thank you. That's a very complex question, not only in Lebanon but everywhere in the world. Especially when you're talking about photographs that were made in the 19th century or early 20th century, and the photographers are no longer there. Especially that you are also talking about photographs that you might not have received directly from photographers or their whoever inherited them, but maybe you received them through their subjects who are features in the pictures that are made by X or Y photographer who gave you a photograph and allowed you to use it. So it's really diverse. There are two types, but legally we have two types throughout the last 20 years. We have two types of typical contracts. These are the contracts that I would take with me when I travel, try to convince people to give their photographs. I would give them a choice. Now, keep in mind that today it's not exactly like this, because I think the last research mission that was done officially at the Arab Image Foundation was maybe in 2004 or 2005. We received later images as donations, so people came to us. But when we traveled aggressively trying to convince people to donate their pictures, we took with us two contracts. One is deposit, and that happens only either for 5 years or 10 years, and one as a donation. And when it's, in both cases, the collection will be named after whoever gave it to the foundation. The donation includes a donation of rights. Against that, the family would receive a digital image, a digital version or printed versions in the 90s. And a commitment to mention the family and the names of people who are featuring in the photographs in the photographs. The other one, we would push for a 10-year deposit because 5 years is too little to do anything with it, and many collections left after 5 or 10 years before we even used them. So withdrawing collections could partly be termination of contract, and we give them the option: do you own the collection or not? They say we want it, so it could be that. But Kleidman's collection, I think Kleidman's was 5 years, and he asked for it back. Yeah, but whoever wanted to break a contract, no problem. It's not like we tell them no. I mean, Shaderji wanted to donate his collection to the MIT before the contract was over, and we told him yes, that's totally fine, and we kind of agreed that we get copies of those of anything that MIT would digitize and I heard that we just got it. So, so withdrawal is a case by case. You need. We are not an authoritarian archive. We are not state's archive, and I think all who work at the foundation are nice people with like really generous attitude towards owners of photograph. But now the question that has to do with, are we allowed? Well, I have to say, in this exhibition, I took a very strong, like, I took the responsibility of using the images of Rad and Bendov, even though that license is expired. That's my personal assessment of the situation, and I think I cannot imagine that a collector would ask today, a collector in Israel would ask today an organization in Lebanon to pay them rights for an Arab photographer who was never allowed back in Palestine to rescue his studio and whose collection is officially looted, to come nowadays to ask the Arab Image Foundation for rights about this. It's like, no way, I will. Huh? No, but anyway, the rights of this collection is really mediatized. Is a known collection. Even the Israeli curators that worked on it accept that this is looted material. One day, it's going to be easy. One day, if there's a settlement of any rights, this is going to go first. It's very easy. So, So the issue of rights is like a slippery territory, and I'm assuming I always assume this responsibility. When I take an image that was made by a photographer, if he gives me an image of a person, and whether I know the person or not, and I decide to publish that image, I'm taking the responsibility of vis-a-vis the person who is in the picture. So I always trust my intentions, and I go back to I'm not interested in making commerce from this or that. I'm interested in discourse, and I'm really in the art world. I try to act like a historian, and I collect data, and I like to use it. Otherwise, you're not going to see the photographs of Khalil Rad, because they're either in a closet here or in a closet there, and it's they are the Arab Image Foundation in these beautiful binders that Tamara created. You remember the beautiful binders, and people are allowed to. And when I started this project, I said I want to use these as well. So it's my responsibility, and every collection has an issue, either with authorship, either with permissions. And if you're gonna try to honor all of that, you will actually stay home and do nothing. So sometimes you need to take the decision, and as I said, you trust your intentions.
This is about acquisition and disclosure, but when you take a little bit further steps, like using
as if you are doing a kind of artistic or creative things about the duplicate and mixing two photos. I'm not accusing you, but there is a aftertaste feeling that maybe there is an ethical question about it, and don't you think that you are manipulating? You give yourself the right. I'm not. Maybe the
totally,
word is not.
Of course. I assume this. I'm an artist. I take a piece of wood, I use it in my work. It's not the original piece. It becomes something else. Now you may tell me this includes histories of people. I try to include in my work, I call my work, I do the analogy between my work and the work of an analogist. And I'm very much unlike a lot of artists of my generation in the sense that I do not believe in imposing fiction on images pre-existing. And I try my best to excavate every single story that is related to the image. You know very well some of my films in the images of, like This Day, for example. I go to Al-Qaryatain near Homs just to look for this woman who is carrying the jar, because I have seen her pictures in Beirut, and I like that. I think I like meeting people. And but if I know nothing, and if I can recover nothing about the people and the pictures, of course I do allow myself a little bit more plasticity, let's say. And yeah, it's part of the logic with which I operate. It becomes like, it's important to bring images away from somewhere, make them slide or make them cause displacement, bring them to your own work, put them on a table and start doing things to them. Otherwise, you will not cause, like, it's important to cause friction to start getting something interesting out of a document.
Have you ever thought about putting a plan B for safeguarding the Arab Image Foundation
I
treasury?
also, maybe a misconception, I do not work at the Arab Image Foundation. The Arab Image Foundation has 7 or 8 great staff. They are the ones who are who establish these things, and they do have answers to these questions. Yeah, I mean, there are many things. Like in our mission now, if the collection, if the foundation doesn't exist anymore, the collection goes to the Sursuk Museum. If there is a war and our building is bombed, the staff has a clear strategy of what goes out first, what goes out second. Unfortunately, you have to do, it's like Sophie's choice. It's like, yes, you do decide which one goes out first. Ma hek Sharbil, am I right? Yes. Can you raise your voice? They needed to record. Just to record.
Which goes away from the photographic material. Is there, for you personal, okay, you are an artist dealing with photography in a way, is for you a difference between if, for example, a family left behind their photographic album or their carpet in their building? You know what I mean? I know it's, it's something, it's a question you can say, I don't want to answer maybe, but...
Well, the foundation never received a carpet. But
yeah, sadly.
After practicing collecting for 4 or 5 years, taking images away from, like taking images out of albums, this is a practice that made me revise my methods. There are things that I used to do in 1997 or 1998 that I do not do today, such as taking a part of like a page from an album and bringing it to the foundation. I would ask the family to donate either the whole album or nothing. But because the foundation existed at a crossroad, like wanting to operate like a photo agency, but also wanting to operate differently, these practices happened. And it's exactly like what happened in archaeology. Like you remember in archaeology, many archaeologists would, or traffickers would take an ornamented piece out of a column and travel with it and leave the column broken because it has no more ornamentation. There is something that is similar, not exactly as is, similar to this, that we contributed to. But we, not by cutting it, but talking to the owner and convincing the owner that this is more important than others, you see? And 3, 4 years later, I realized that no, this is, again, you don't think that with your mind today, you can imagine how it is like in the 90s also. So I was harsh at myself because I was like, we did stupid things. And in this film, you see a collection in Jordan, and I'm flipping through an album, and my colleague, I'm flipping through the album, and you see on the other hand a page from that album today in the Arab Image Foundation. So clearly, I'm filming the album in Jordan, and I'm showing you on a tablet, and you see right next to it on the light box the page that you saw in the album freestanding. cut. Okay? It's not me who cut it, but anyway, it's there. So these actions happened, and we need to assume them. We need to assume them to understand the evolution in discourse and the foundation. And so just to follow, so after that I said, no. Even if I see a beautiful frame picture, I need to take it with the frame. And then I mean, there was a resistance also in the foundation, because we have a tiny conservation room. It cannot, you bring 100 frames and you fill the whole room. So, yeah, I mean, this is where I started to be at unease with taking things away from their original places, especially that technology was allowing us further to reproduce things properly. In the 90s, there was no digital photography. There was no scanners. In the late 90s, we acquired a scanner that is too limited in scope, and they were anyway very, very expensive. So then I started having desires, like if I see a framed image next to a bookshelf, I have the desire to take the bookshelf as well. And then you realize that actually, no, you want the carpet too, because it's the whole thing is a piece of life, and it's hard to damages just one thing. And recently with Hashim al-Madani, I want to keep him alive. Then this process of keeping wanting things to add to a photograph or to an album because of the knowledge that exists in them can go forever.
Well, I heard about somebody who's tried to find something in the soil which is. Well, somebody who's tried to find something in the soil which is maybe 5,000 years away is always tried to find something which is more in the collective mind. And the carpus is much more maybe the DNA of, I don't know, of a family, of something structured. So
one would argue that.
But I accept the answer, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But no, thanks for the question, because this is really like an important issue. And now, of course, now if I see a beautiful collection in a living environment, and I'm interested in it, I can do an artwork about it and keep it where it is. But of course, things are not as simple as this, because the moment you do an artwork that is visible about something that is at a family, all of a sudden there are eyes open on it, and then many people will eventually come and take it, buy it, convince the family to sell it. It's amazing. And it's a vicious circle.
Yeah, I just have a question that sort of follows on that sort of material remain or residue sort of issue. So you're talking about this sort of privileging, or at least, so the difference in, and I don't know if it's just an evidentiary character, but the difference in stories that come out of defectual or imperfect images. So I'm wondering also, like, what happens of perfect images that are disregarded? I'm not saying in your project, just in general. I'm just wondering, like, what are the sort of limits of, is that sort of material history, that mode of excavation, historically specific to analog photography? It's not that digital photography has no material trace or digital files. I mean, there's resolution and circulation and many other things. But there's less of an immediate indexical trace on digital photography. And I'm wondering what happens when this method, I mean, is there simply as simple as a shift back from material history to content and to content analysis when we go back to digital? And doesn't that make the sort of material approach to the defect sort of, myopic in a sense?
I mean, thank you, Hisham. I practiced work on photography from 1995, I think. And I've always drawn to content in photographs. And this project is an exception in a way in my work. All of a sudden, I turn my back to content, and I want to explore the carrier of content. It doesn't mean that I will spend my life here, because of course you keep an image for the. I mean, at home you keep a photograph because of the person in the picture, and this is an essential. And no one can deny a picture the name of the persons in it. And I hope I'm not doing this in this project. But so this is just to tell you that I have a strong attachment, at least to the photographs that I brought to the foundation, that have to do with specific axes that interest me tremendously. Like, people in the foundation know my put Hashim al-Madani aside, I spent 20 years of my life, or like 15 years of my life, working on his collection with him, parallel to him, dealing with him aging, dealing with him turning a little bit blind, etc., etc. But put this aside, I have attraction to Jibrayil Jabbour, to Abd Salam al-Ujayli, to Fuad Hilmi. They are nobody. These are people who few people know who they are. But I just happened to encounter how great they are in what they are doing, just because they took pictures, and I ended up having those pictures. All of a sudden, I feel responsible like Abd Salam al-Ujayli is a former minister in Syria. He is a poet and a writer and a former member of the parliament. He lives his entire life until he died in 2002 in Raqqa as a medical doctor, treating people for free. He has written few books. He was passionate about photography. In 1947, he bought a camera, and he decided to go liberate Palestine in 1948, and he took this camera with him. He was disappointed with all what was happening in the Arab resistance in Palestine, and he came back 6 months later with not more than 30, 40 photographic negatives. What do you do with this? You read his books. It's like a totally unknown figure. Fuad Hilmi was a bank employee who spent his life constructing one album with his family on one side and images that he took from television in 1960 on the other side, or pictures of ships crossing Canal Suez after it was reopened after a long time embargo. People who lived a modernity without the headlines, without saying, we are living in a modern world. No, they lived it naturally, without any pretension. And I can go on and on. Jibrayil Jabbour is an amazing historian who realized 40 years after he left Al-Qaryatayn near Homs that he lived an extraordinary times that he did not document. And after teaching at AUB and becoming a chairman of the Arabic department, he took Manoug, this friend of his, to Syria to document the last Bedouins, the last tribes of the Bedouins, because they were becoming naturalized. These are amazing people, and you cannot, I cannot but feel responsible for bringing them along into this vessel, this historical, that we call history, just to make them visible. But for the purpose of this project, I did not want to bring these single histories. And I thought I might try to, I also have to tell you something important. Where all of this come from? There is a beautiful video art piece by Lisa Steele, made by a Canadian video artist named Lisa Steele, called The Birthday Suit, where she undresses all her clothes on her 30th birthday. She's right in front of the camera. She takes all her clothes off, and she decides to tell us about who she is through every scar on her body. Take this as an exercise and do it yourself. You realize that your body is a record of modern times. Your body is a record of things, surgeries, mutilation, whatever. And this is what stayed in me, and all of a sudden came back to me alone when I was working on the history of the Arab Image Foundation. And I decided that history is not written only through content, but through other traces. And let's look for those traces. Tamara helped a lot in going through all the collection of the Arab Image Foundation, taking telephone pictures of every negative that has a broken part, every negative that has something applied to it that you don't see in the end of the picture and that could testify about how photographers worked in order to produce the image. And so forth. This is how this project came to me, came to be. You had also a related question?
My question is regarding digital and the way digital is kind of collected, because the way you say that digital, or a lot of people feel like that you can't preserve digital, or it doesn't have the same materialism as analog. But the thing is that, with certain hard drive, we know for a fact that digital photographs are prone to deterioration or manipulation, not intentional manipulation. For example, there was an artist, I can't remember her name, but she was doing an exhibition on photographs that she's taken. But a few days before the exhibition, her laptop was stolen by a thief who deleted everything on the laptop. But by the time the cops had caught him, she was able to retrieve some of the photographs, but they were kind of
corrupted.
Not just corrupt, there were certain
corrupted.
Yeah, exactly, corrupted. So she did the exhibition regardless, and she kind of named it after the thief who stole it. So an accident like this feels a bit, it has that context and that habitat that you talk about when you talk about negatives.
Sure,
and,
exactly, totally. But going back to the question of also Hisham, what I missed to answer is also digital platforms. Instagram provides you with a continuous broadcast. It's not only one broadcast, it's so many thousands or million times of a broadcast. And I remember as a kid growing up in the early 80s, it was like a big thing to record a TV program, a TV broadcast. I remember very well when different militias in Lebanon took over Beirut TV station and all of a sudden announced things that are different from the regular programming. You had that desire to record this because it's never going to come back. You will never retrieve it from any archive. This is the antecedent of what's happening today on Facebook or Instagram. I don't know if anyone has the desire to multiply, to do recording of the whole tissue that I'm calling maybe habitat. I mean, also as well, I'm thinking if the term can be used on a virtual, non-tangible platform, especially that what you see on your Instagram is not what she sees on her Instagram page. So I don't know how to conceive of this, but one day I think I will reach somewhere. So there is a pre-digital that is broadcast, because broadcast is not only analog. Once things are aired, they are subject to corruption. That's like, I'm sure you have not seen this. Like when there's a thunderstorm, the TV program that you're watching would go this, yeah. So this is unrecordable. This hasn't. If you go to the archive of the TV station and watch the same program that you were watching while the thunderstorm was happening, it's not going to be the same. So there is something that is similar to digital in broadcast, especially electronic broadcast.
Another question that I had was regarding kind of the archiving. At this point, the foundation has kind of standardized what the archiving and digitization of photographic objects. Even though discussions about certain collections still come up and they still kind of reach certain disagreements. But when it comes to kind of countries where the Arab Image Foundation doesn't have a lot of collection on because of the political nature of these countries, for example, Yemen, when I was at the foundation trying to find photographs from Yemen, I was told that there aren't any.
And Christine Khouri, who is here, always wanted to go to Yemen, or at least she was bringing Yemen since I met her, I think. And yeah, because we are not an engine that claims coverage of the whole Arab world. We just, if a member shows interest in going to Yemen, then we have Yemen. If nobody shows interest in going to Yemen, it's...
The thing is that it may be a burden on the foundation to kind of cover all these areas, especially when it's kind of, in a way, a foreign or an inferior entity that's entering these self-protected countries where, they don't share a lot with the outworld, but they might share within their own
Arab
network.
world.
Yeah. So the idea is that maybe there is a way to kind of spread these kind of guidelines of digitization and archiving, so that maybe an entity in Yemen itself can learn from the foundation and do the same to.
It's not as easy as it sounds, although like an international organization could maybe put a lot of money in this, but I do not believe in initiatives that are imposed up-down. We have not encountered anyone in Yemen who is interested seriously in creating something like this, so it did not happen. Because I'm saying we did not encounter because the foundation created a program named MEPI that has to do with sharing training, or like doing training on photograph conservation across different Arab regions. And I think Yemen was included one time, like we received someone, if I'm not mistaken, but also someone from Sudan, someone from Alexandria, someone from different Arab countries who would come on the expense of this program and get a training and come back a year later, etc., etc., etc. So this is an ongoing program. Whether it led to an actual transformation in the knowledge of in the field in that country or not, we don't have an accurate measurement of it. But shall we cut? Is there any serious question that wants absolutely to go out, or we?
Just have a quick thought.
I mean, I'm happy to stay here
quickly.
until the morning.
Quickly,
but
just
I don't want to stay alone.
No,
So
no,
it's
no.
like I feel like.
Just a quick thought, and I want you to talk more about it or to have an explanation. It's not a question. I mean, so as an artist, research that go to the Arab Image Foundation and deal with this archive that have history value first. Of course, any image or any archive have a history value, have a time value, definitely, and have a what you call like a man value, as you explained, the obsessed.
A
of,
man value?
Yeah, I mean, who took the photo and at that time, and his practice and how he lived his life, and what happened to his archive, and of course the what do you call the duty or the practice of this organization or Arab Image Foundation is to deal with all these things. And of course, you are looking into these things. Definitely, you came as an artist to look into these things. Now, I just want to have a thought about the borderline between research and artist, because at the end, what you are using is a copy from this negative archive, no? When you are doing an exhibition, you're not using the original.
No.
So you're using a copy.
And only in mapping setting we used some original material, which are huge, beautiful index books that I researched for the exhibition and then gave them to the foundation.
Yeah, so mainly when you do a copy, of course, you are mainly also, not mainly, my opinion, I'm
Yes,
having a thought,
yes,
is
please,
interesting more in the content of the image, on what is inside the image. That make you also bring Khalil Rad.
Yes.
Well, that's what make you bring Khalil Rad to rewrite, or not to rewrite, to have a spot on the history of Palestine, no? This photographer look at Palestine in that way, and the other read it another way, and so you're dealing with content at the end, kind of. But of course, with I know listening to this lecture, of course, then we know also another interest in the objects and how the photo become an object. So can you explain more about this borderline between you as an artist and this practice related to the...
I mean, like the first photographer who came to take pictures of people or things was denied rights because no, why do you want to take picture of this? It's for me. The architect who built the building claimed rights over the pictures too. So I don't know if you're talking about rights. No. So when I invite or when I use a picture and bring it into my work, I assume automatically that I'm bringing a knowledge about it that is not available with it. And then I built on it, like I use the term fossil I used to actually. It's an interesting, because a fossil is at the same time designates the animal that is fossilized, but a different material. It's exactly the same. It's like a fossil is a fish and at the same time a piece of stone. And a photograph in my work is playing its role, is who the photograph is as a picture of so-and-so, made by so-and-so at that particular date. But along with all of this, it's now part of my work. And if it's a copy, then if my work is able to digest that photograph and makes out of it something else that is produced by me as an artist, that is signed, dated today, then the world has to live with these doubles, with the double dates, with the double authorship sometimes. Like my project on Madani has this double authorship in a way. Him in the photography world, me in the art world. And but
I'm not talking about the right. I'm talking about the object by itself. You're making a copy and manipulate the content, so it become a new object completely. That's what I'm like.
Yes, the foundation in its practice sometimes makes 10 different versions. They lay around, but this is a 6x7 negative of the same picture, and this is a color transparency of the same picture because we needed it differently. We published it differently. There are these copies around within the office of the Arab Image Foundation, and they are very. Now we realize that they need to be organized as well, and they are not necessarily. They would refer you to the original, but they should be indexed as well. And this is Clémence Cotard who decided to do this. I think she has she included everything in the collection. But the thing that you mentioned, why is in this exhibition there is no original material? Any original item would have so much weight in this exhibition. Therefore, I did not want to deal with original material. And funnily enough, there are two exhibitions in Beirut: the Past Disquiet and this exhibition that both do not include a single original material. And I like the idea of transforming something into something else, creating tissue. Like making a book about an existing collection. You don't ask yourself, why does the book not have original pictures stuck on them? No, we are talking about diffusion, and photography is about diffusion. So photographs of photographs are totally legitimate photographically. And the question is, do you modify something in them or not? In my opinion, even if you don't modify anything, the picture is different. And this is the difference between me and Walid, for example, Rad. This is the like I make a theater around a piece of work that makes you, after my talk, look at it differently. And this is hard to achieve, but it announces the work is already different.
I'm not.
So-
I mean, I
so-
don't
so-
mind. No, but I don't mind to make a copy. It's not like less
Yeah,
value or more value at
no,
all.
what
What
I'm
I'm saying is, then I'm gonna look at it. My desire to look at it is more into the content, not as what will happen to this object that this fascinating lecture was telling me, which is will be the role of
Yes.
the Arab Image Foundation.
Yes, if
It isn't
there's-
looking like a-
Yes, sometimes you will not see any, you will not find any additional piece of information on the second generation. Would you still consider it different? In my opinion, yes, it's different. It carries new information that I cannot see now, but someone else in the future will be able to see. So, yes, if you just let me, but again, what you did not, maybe I said something that I did not clarify very well, that it is this question comes in an artist's work every day. When you are working on another document, do I resist the temptation of changing something in the original document or not? And sometimes it's so sexy. It's like you want, like, many people think that's the sexiest piece in the exhibition, the third window, are the archaeological facts that are glowing because I changed. In my opinion, whether I changed or not is almost the same. Not exactly, almost the same. But I ask myself, do I do it or not? And then I keep them as is. Weeks later, do I do that or not? And if the desire is so persistent, then okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it and see. But and I'm not saying this is better than that. It's just a different approach because both of them again will make the object different. Roy.
Yeah. As a comment on this last discussion, I now realize something that, in fact, 2 days ago I went to the Beirut art fair, and I was visiting the curated section of the photography, and I I noticed the two huge portrait printed with scratch of your work, and I remember, like, I stood there and was like, this is super nice, it looks super beautiful, and I had a totally different feeling dealing with those images than though I have seen them a lot of times before. And now when you were talking about this, I realized something, that probably here comes the artist and the historian, where the accumulation of your trajectory and dealing with those images add something to reading the image regarding the history and the content of it. So those are like the same two portraits. I have seen them digitally, small sizes, postcards, and because you presented them as part of your work, but the accumulation of presenting them many times and every time in a different way, different scale, different framing, adds something to the work of the historian and to the artist, to how deal with this kind of work. And I think that's what was interesting for me at this encounter the other day. It was not looking in more details in the face of the person. I was not seeing the person anymore. I was just like taken by all the details of like the production of this work. So that's it.
Yeah, these are two examples of items that have been considered, have been announced out of use because because the photographer argued with the husband of the woman who wanted to stop this the reproduction of this. I wish Hanan was here because I also allowed myself, against the will of the husband, I took the woman's side. Against the husband, both of them are dead now, and I decided to republish over and over and over an image that is a detail and an exception. That's the only times when Madani had a problem with someone and they were about to fight, and he decided to scratch the face of the woman to ensure that the photographer will never use this picture again. And here I come back 50 years later, discovering this and say, no, this is going to be the huge, the largest statement in the history of the practice of photography in Saida, and as if this woman is kind of representing a whole community of other women whose faces were not scratched, but who would have been treated the same way by their husbands or their fathers. So I took that decision to do that. And I agree with you totally that in the light of my new exhibition, all of a sudden this work or the discourse that I'm able to vocalize may be better today than 10 years ago when I worked. I worked instinctively when this project is from 2004, the first Madani studio practices project. So nowadays, all of a sudden, next to it, you see other bodies of work that would affect people's reading of these two photographs. Now, to disappoint you, these two pictures you've never seen before. Because these are different pictures of the same woman and the same friend who I found 2 years ago in the archive. And I decided to sell them for the benefit of the Arab Image Foundation. So there is a Beirut collector who bought these and paid the money to the Arab Image Foundation, and we produced it for him. They are the same because they are products of the same discourse, but they're not. She is a few years younger than in the other picture. Yeah. We announce it over. Thank you very much.